This is the Garo Bone Tablet, and it is one of the most mysterious artifacts ever found in Israel. It dates back to approximately 700 BCE. But what makes this so special is that it may have been used for the very first time in human history to cast a shadow puppet show. This is an actual photo of the artifact, which was discovered in 2007 at the Kirbet El Karak archaeological site, which itself was built on top of another ancient city called Deb, which was around during the time of the Kingdom of Moab and the Kingdom of Israel. The stone slab has over 20 figures carved into it, many of which appear to be animals, though some seem to be humans with large ears. On the bottom there are 2 holes where a rod could be inserted to suspend it from above. But there's something else too. If you look closely, you can see a series of tiny holes drilled along the edge of the figures, almost like it was some sort of early form of a punch card or a braille reading device. Now, you might think this is pretty boring, but archaeologists believe that the Garo Bone Tablet could be evidence of the very first shadow puppet show ever performed by ancient humans. So here's how they think it worked. Imagine hanging this board up above a fire, or perhaps even just placing it in front of a flickering oil lamp with the figures facing away from the light source. In between each of the figures, there would be a small hole for the light to pass through. Now, because the figures would be blocking the light, their silhouettes would be cast onto a wall behind them. By moving the board back and forth, it's believed that they could have created the illusion of movement, like a shadow puppet show that we might see today. For the longest time, scholars believed that shadow puppetry originated in China around 2,000 years ago. However, the Garo Bone Tablet predates those Chinese artifacts by nearly 3,000 years. Not only that, but scholars have since concluded that shadow puppetry likely originated independently in several different cultures across the world. We know that the Greeks were performing shadow puppet shows in the 4th century BC, for example, and there's also evidence that the ancient Mexicans were doing it around the same time. However, there's still one major problem with this theory. The truth is, we don't actually know what any of these ancient people looked like. So we have no way of knowing if the figures carved into the Garo Bone board actually resemble anything that could have lived in the region. Around 700 BCE, it could just be some sort of abstract art. It could have nothing to do with animals or humans at all. Or perhaps it's just some sort of ancient board game. Archaeologists did find several other clay tablets at the site depicting similar figures. These are known as the Moabite stone tablets, and they redecorated with a variety of images, including humans, animals, and other objects. Some of the drawings appear to show weapons such as swords and spears. Others seem to show domestic animals, like sheep and goats. Still, none of them quite match the figures seen on the Garo Bone Tablet. To make things even more confusing, the archaeologist who originally found the Garo Bone thought it was a genuine artifact, but later changed his mind and said it was probably a modern forgery. He said it didn't belong in that particular archaeological layer, and claimed that someone had somehow put the holes into the figures after it was carved. This is significant, because if he's right and it's not a genuine ancient artifact, then it couldn't have been used for casting shadows in a makeshift puppet show. That being said, another archaeologist came along and argued that the first guy was wrong. They performed their own experiments with the board and concluded that yes, it would have been possible for them to use it for casting shadows, especially since they found several other artifacts that were clearly used for the purpose of creating fire and light. That means that the theory of the shadow puppet show is still alive and well, despite what the original excavator had to say about it. One of the main reasons why archaeologists were able to come to that conclusion is because of this statue of a lion that was found in a nearby cave called the Onet Cave, which was inhabited by ancient humans during the 8th century BCE. There are 2 things that make this particular statue so important. First, It appears to depict a lion in the exact same posture as one of the figures on the Garo bone. Second, the details on the statue seem to match up with descriptions found in the Bible. The Bible describes a group of young men who were skilled at hunting lions and bears. Archaeologists believe that this group of hunters were the Moabites, an ancient tribe that lived near the Dead Sea. The statue of the lion appears to be a perfect match for the description of a young lion that was brought before King David as a trophy. If this is true, then it proves without a doubt that the figures depicted on the Garo Bone Tablet could indeed be animals that roamed the earth around 700 BCE. It also means that original archaeologists who doubted the authenticity of the board was wrong. After all, if it's a fake, it would mean that whoever made it also fabricated the lion statue to fit the narrative. Now, that doesn't necessarily prove that the Garo bone was used for shadow puppets, but it does make it far more likely. It's also worth noting that we have other forms of early art that show similar figures. For example, we have these two clay fragments known as the Teldan. One of them shows what appears to be a bull's head, while the other seems to show a human wearing some sort of hat. The fact that the animal on the figurine has horns but no ears, as well as the human wearing a tall headdress, suggests that they are meant to represent horned animals from the desert that were known for their large ears. Again, if the original archaeologist is correct, and these are just random shapes with no meaning, then it would mean that humans in the 8th century BCE had an obsession with carving large ears onto everything. As far as we can tell, these are the oldest known examples of figurative art to come out of the Levant region. If we're being honest, however, we really can't say for sure what these figures are supposed to represent. After all, we have no idea what animals or people looked like back then. It could be that the figures on the Garo bone are nothing like the animals we know today. Maybe they were more like unicorns or griffins, creatures that are half animal and half human. Perhaps they had big floppy ears, because that's just what all the animals in this world looked like. Maybe the whole shadow puppet thing is completely off base, and it was actually used for something else entirely. At the end of the day, we simply don't know. But what we do know is that whatever it was used for, it's a truly unique artifact that we have never seen anything like before or since. It is difficult to imagine the kind of trouble that these archaeologists got into when they started poking holes in ancient artifacts. Today, it's very unlikely that a new artifact like this would be allowed to leave the country. Most ancient findings stay in the region where they were found. But back then, things were very different. Thanks for watching.